Texas female.
I don't know.
She
Grandma.
having her grandma's memorial.
Oh,
And we're live. Thank you. Good evening. We will go ahead and call our budget workshop number 2 into session. And we'll start with our first item of discussion, which will be our Public Works budget presentation. Director Tate. And I will note just real quick that the vice mayor is out of town, so she will be unable to be here with us tonight, but she is watching the live stream.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Well, it never gets any easier. So I have tried to make a presentation tonight that makes you think of cotton candy and carnival rides and all kinds of nice and happy stuff, happy thoughts. So I'm going to start off with my first slide is the current staffing levels that will be under the new budget. It's no change from last year. We've got a few more names on it this year, such as Nate. And then, well, there is one change, the programming assistant. It will reflect that Tegan Barber is a full-time employee under this upcoming budget. Other than that, I've broken this out with, you see there's red asterisks showing percentages of employees that come out of each department, such as Ricky Reeves. I had lobbied for a stormwater supervisor for this year, but in light of, current situation, that supervisor is going to have to stay streets and stormwater, at least for the next year. And so half of Ricky Reeves' salary will come out of streets, half of it will come out of stormwater. And then as last year, half of Nathaniel Hall's salary, the engineering tech, will come out of streets and half out of stormwater. And then along with Director Johnson, she will continue to serve a stormwater capacity on that side as well. And then, of course, Kate Hackney is broken down 4 ways to Sunday. She's 25% community development, 25% streets, 25% solid waste, and 25% stormwater. So she serves all departments, and I'll be able to reflect on that as we get into those budgets. Any questions on the personnel staff?
So were you saying are Nate, Ricky, and Leslie, the other half comes out of general fund for them?
Out of the general fund.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next page. This clicker work. All right, so what I've done is I've extracted some of the personnel and some of the operations budgets, exactly what you have in your packets. And I've made some notes about what we're looking at here. So the Public Works Department summary includes the Streets Division, the Parks Division, Facilities, and Fleet. So everyone that works in those departments and are funded by the general fund are on this summary right here. And you can see I put a net gain, a note there for a net gain of the programming assistant, increasing that to 15.25 for this year. Some of the highlights, the salaries increased 7.7% due to the 1.5% COLA for all employees, as well as the conversion of the parks programming assistant. That added a net cost, I believe, I meant to write that in there, but I think it was a net cost of $32,000 was all that increased that by. And the larger portion of that increase is COLA and the coincidental benefits that come at retirement, taxes, and so forth. So all other accounts were adjusted marginally to coincide with the COLA. And you'll see line 133 highlighted in yellow for $12,738. Okay, so I have an employee that's retiring at the end of June, and he has worked for the city so long that he's maxed out on vacation. So it was too big a number not to include it in this year's budget. So aside from that, this budget would have only increased by $43,402, but because of having to pay that additional vacation pay, the salaries for all the general funded public works employees increased $56,140 overall.
Is there anyone else anticipated to retire in the next few years?
Not to my knowledge. I've got several that are in the 25-year window,
okay,
but no one has come forward, intended to retire anytime soon.
Okay.
Congrats to him.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this next slide is the Public Works Department operations, 43,100. There's been several increases overall, but the total operations budget for the department has increased. But we'll start at the top. Education and certification. Last year, most of you know, I think I've probably spoken to most of the commissioners last year about our issue with CDL training. And so we now have a fixed opportunity for CDL training. So I put money in the budget this year. We didn't have so much last year, but we did it anyway. But this year I allowed for additional funding for CDL drivers training in the street department. But it also includes, because we will be hiring a new street department supervisor and of course the engineering technician, Nate, there's some classes and things that he has to have for TDOT grants that he may have to travel to Knoxville or Nashville or somewhere to participate. So I had to increase that. The biggest cost increase will probably become at the hands of the new supervisor, because they will have to have CEI training, right-of-way training, and different state level certifications and trainings for their job positions. So I had to increase that to make sure we cover those costs. Line 261, machinery and equipment, or maintenance of equipment and vehicles. I increased that. We have an aging fleet. We do have 2 new trucks on order in the street department, but we may not see them for several months. But in the meantime, our average fleet of light duty trucks is somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 years old. And so we have a few new ones, but we've got more older ones. So I increased the maintenance money because that's more in line with what we spent this year, just keeping the fleet that we have running. Travel was increased due to the education and certification requirements. You can see in the green with the multi-lines coming out, I highlighted areas of savings where we actually cut some of those costs. Contract services, fuel, debt service. We had a item roll off of debt service, and I'll get back to debt service as we work through this, because I have an announcement to make about debt service. And then machinery and equipment down in capital. That is to pay for 1 new pickup truck and a new tractor. Okay, so you remember last month I asked the commission to allow me to purchase 2 electric trucks. Okay, one of those trucks had in 2024 was funded through a loan Mr. Alexander had baked into the budget for one of those trucks. We never got the truck, but the loan money was still there. So it's not reflected in this budget because the revenue for that is still in the general fund. So this $230,000 reflects a new tractor for mowing the right of way, which the one we have now, it's about 8 years old. It's been in the shop for 6 months. It's been in and out of the shop for 6 months. We can't keep it running, and it's time to put it out of its misery. That will also be that, and along with 1 pickup truck, will be a loan. We will buy the equipment this year, but the debt service, you'll see the debt service didn't increase in line 600 because we won't start paying that debt service until the 27 budget.
Okay.
So, but we have to reflect the money that we're going to spend out of the 942 line machinery and equipment.
Director Tate, with the old tractor, does it just go out to pasture, or can you sell parts?
We'll put it on Compass Auctions.
Okay.
Remember, we've had good success, and somebody will buy it. Somebody is just somebody that has time to work on it can keep it running, but we need it. And it spent more time at Chattanooga Tractor since October of last year than it has at the shop. So therefore, and it's starting to show. We'll wait till everything really grows.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right, next, fleet maintenance. This is an easy one. Fleet maintenance, very, very minimal change. There's some increases in travel due to, there's a couple of certifications that Randy Bell had asked me that he could go to. I think one of them, Brent may have talked to him about this. There's something about a fire truck that he needs to go to a school to get a certification on. I don't remember, we just briefly talked about it, but we increased that just slightly so to give him the opportunity to attend that training as he continues to maintain our fire department and our large vehicle fleet. Small tools and equipment was the biggest increase. Overall, the fleet budget increased by 34.5%, but $9,000 of that was to buy software for diagnostic equipment. You know, when you go to the shop and the guy comes out there and plugs into your car and reads the codes off of it, tell you what's wrong. Well, Randy does the same thing. That's how you work on cars these days, right? Big trucks. But big trucks require specific equipment. You just can't go to AutoZone and use their little off-the-shelf material. So Randy keeps those updated. Randy used to pay for these out of his pocket. And 2 years ago, I told him no more. I said, if the city needs it, the city will pay for it. And we do need it. So the additional from 9,000 to 17,650 is for software and updates for the diagnostic tools that he uses. And then I just put a little note there in the pinkish color, just inflationary costs for tires and parts. And overall, his budget increased 8980, but that's nearly 100% for diagnostic equipment. All right, Parks and Recreation. All right, this one's going to take some explaining. Okay, so we cut contract services by down to 61,500 because, you know, we had some contract services out there that we wouldn't utilize this year. So that was an easy one to cut for just what we needed. But we increased things like cell phone usage. With Tegan coming on full time, she already has a city phone because she works at the community center most of the time with active older adults. And then she also helps with Food Truck Fridays. But her and Jeffrey use tablets when they go to these events to register people on rec desk for these events, and you know they need that access. So I increased the funding in that in the cell phone line to cover those costs for tablets and cell phones as they do their outside work. Travel, Jeffrey has, and Tegan will too, has a couple of national park, trail and recreation organizations that have annual meetings, and he's a member of those. So I included some money so he could go represent the city of Red Bank and learn and bring back new ideas back to the Public Works Department. Special events. Okay, that's a big jump from 10,000 to 31,200, but it's not an increase to the budget. That additional money had originally been coming out of the legislative fund, out of 41,400 to 87. And that money was, I guess it was your budget. And that's what supported the Jubilee and the Christmas Parade and Festival. And so that money supported those events. So we talked with Ms. Perry, and we decided we would take that portion and put it in parks. And then that way Jeffrey could administer it as he needed to. You know, it's kind of silly for one department to spend another department's budget, you know, for something like that. So that was a trade-off. That 31,200 comes from other previously budgeted areas, and I'm sure she'll talk about how that one was reduced when she comes up to speed. Everything else, we've kind of knocked things down. Supplies. So let me talk about supplies. In the parks, if you remember previous budgets, we had a community center budget. We had a Reading Road facility budget, James Avenue budget. Every park had a separate budget, no more. If you looked at your sheets for those different parks, they have no money allocated to those parks. All of the repair and maintenance money is now in facilities management, and all of the supply money is in facilities management. And that way it gets handled by Justin and Kate, you know, and we can monitor those funds. Kate used to buy a case of toilet paper, and she'd take 20% out of community service, 20% out of Reading Road, 20% out of James Avenue, you know, just
Poor Kate.
yeah. So we have streamlined all of that. There's no more park expenses unless in future years, if we get into a big site development or capital project, then we will keep those lines open so we can show those as like a capital improvement. Office supplies we cut. Uniforms, I bumped that up mainly for inflation and in order to be able to buy Tegan some appropriate clothing that she can wear to events representing the city of Red Bank. And you can see overall, aside from the first page where the parks personnel salaries and benefits were on page 1 in the summary, overall, that budget has come down $740. And that's even after adding the special event money in there on line 287. Facilities management, another big one. You'll see the area highlighted in lavender, electric, water, gas, and telephone. All city utilities are now consolidated in the facilities management division. And those are all centrally funded. Doesn't matter if it's the police department, public works, the fire department. Those are all centrally funded and paid out of one account or those individual accounts. And those have not had any increases since last year. I ran the numbers on just last week, and some of them were close on, some of them we've got a little comfort room there, but it wasn't sufficient to raise or lower, so we left everything like it was. So that's the same. I increased the maintenance of vehicles, 261. I increased that by 100% because Justin drives a 9-year-old truck, and he had one incident this year where he had to have it serviced, and it cost $1,100, and he only had $750 in there. So I raised that up. Hopefully, it'll cover any future expenses on that vehicle. Repair and maintenance buildings. Now, there's a big old green bubble right there, and it says all maintenance expenses have been removed from the individual parks budget lines and consolidated into 41,800, along with all other city facilities. This resulted in a net decrease of the parks budget of $112,750, while it increased the repair and maintenance fund in 41,800 by only $35,000. So that was a good trade-off. And part of that money that was budgeted for facilities in parks last year was for big ticket items like pool covers. And we had in 200, we had the swimming pool audit, which you'll hear about next month. And so there were some big ticket items in there that rolled one-time purchases that rolled off. And all in all, the debt service, okay, now's a good time to talk about debt service. You'll see the debt service increased for the facilities management, $33,078. Okay, that increase was due to the items that we took out a loan for in 24. Tennis court, resurfacing, fencing. We put the fencing around the cemetery. We replaced the heat and air systems at the boxing building, and a lot of expensive work that Justin did that year. And so that loan, that note come due is debt service this year. Now, I've got a statement here I'm going to read because trying to remember all this, I'll forget something. But so commissioners, during my preparation for this presentation, identified a possible discrepancy in the debt service allocations within the Public Works, Streets, and Facilities Management divisions. After a thorough staff review, we discovered that figures provided for last year's budget presentation appear to have been mislabeled internally in terms of the divisions they were assigned to. These misallocations trace back to existing internal documents from the 25 budget. Following an inquiry with the Director of Finance and Administration and the Chief Financial Officer, they were able to reconcile the correct loan details, confirming that a mislabeled line entry may have led to the discrepancy. And I'll stop right here and tell you what happened was on the information that they were left. It had Public Works, there was Police Department notes, and then Public Works and State Street Aid notes, and then there was Public Works, and it said facilities. And then there was a facilities line. And so when we got to tracing back the money and the loans, Tracy actually went and pulled resolutions to see which one applied to which. And when we went back, it appears that someone had wrote facilities on one of the lines, and that was what it was charged to when it should have been charged to Public Works. And so well, let me read the rest of it. Importantly, while these allocations are incorrect, the total debt itself remains unchanged. Only the division assignments within the Public Works that have responsibility to repay the debt were affected. The city's financial obligations remain consistent, and there is no impact on the FY26 budget estimate. Staff will ensure that necessary corrections are made ahead of the Commission's first vote on the budget scheduled for May 20th. This will allow time for thorough review and confirmation that the budget request remains unchanged before the vote takes place. So somewhere in the process, and you remember last year there was a lot of hands, in the budget process. But somewhere it appears that this item was meant to go on this line and this item was meant to go on the other line, and they got switched. But the money is right. Tracy and Chris ran the figures, and it is the same amount of money. We just got to indicate the correct line that it's being charged to on debt service. So, all right. And then you can see that the total facility budget increase 11%, $71,978. And keep in mind, though, that was with a $121,000 reduction in the parks budget on top of that. All right. So I know there's some questions about that.
Okay, so for the revision you just mentioned, what does that look like? I mean, do we need to revise last year's or like do an amendment for last year's to reconcile that, or are we just gonna kind of roll straight into it?
I don't think so. I think at this point, I don't think that it would require revision because the money's right.
Yeah.
And it's all general fund. So it's like, 100,000 in public works and 200,000 in facilities, and it should have been the other way around.
Okay.
The figures come out the same, but before we send this year's budget to the comptroller, we want to make sure it's right going
We're
forward.
just gonna swap those numbers. It'll change the numbers within that little division, but not the overall numbers.
Okay, I just want to make sure all the housekeeping is prim and tight.
Will that show up in what the figures we've been given before as the
The ending balance, yes. It's gonna change facilities management, bottom line, and the public works bottom line by the same amounts.
You'll probably see the debt service for the facilities management will probably increase the amount that's in the 116,230 on line 600. That number there on first look will roll over to facilities management debt service, because that was for all of the items we did in 2024 that we borrowed the money for. And it's also the city hall building we still have a substantial debt on too. And so somehow some got put on one line, some got put on the other line. We want to fix that. And the public works will probably come down to, I don't know, I ain't gonna say now, but it was a small number.
Yeah.
And the facilities management will increase slightly. But it will be, at the end of the day, those two numbers will still be that total. I think it was.
So Mayor, I'd just like to emphasize there's no change to the ending fund balance.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
The 247,932, that won't roll off. There'll be another next, okay.
Right. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that one, I think that was a 4-year note.
Okay.
So we'll have it for the next 2 to 3 years.
Kind of one more, just sort of long-term question. We have some aging vehicles. What is sort of the replacement schedule look like? Kind of 2, 3, 5 years down the road.
Well, not to be a dead horse, but we're still talking CIP, and the city manager is working on a program right now, and myself and Director Johnson and Director Perry, and we're having talks right now on how we're going to go forward with a plan to make this a reality. And I think it's very promising that within the next year we'll see some kind of schedule for replacement of vehicles. Just today I spoke to a leasing company about leasing vehicles just to see what options that we had in that area. And so we'll pull all that together. And but right now I've got 2 vehicles that I have on order right now for the street department. And then I've got 2 that I'll be ordering out of this budget for solid waste, which is the next department. And that will buy us some time. Our big trucks, for the most part, well, we'll get into, I've got one big truck that we're going to order, and we'll talk about it when we get to State Street.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, there's been parts purchased for garbage trucks already along the way. So
Yeah, and our garbage trucks are all fairly new. They're just about 4 years old. And they've still got some life left in them. We can buy some more time. We take care of our equipment too. My guys do a really good job of taking care of what the city trusts them. Solid waste. So now we're out of the general fund and we're into the solid waste fund. And these are what the numbers look like. Now, you're gonna look at this and you're gonna think, well, he's crazy. That can't be right. 1.5% COLA and salaries decrease? What? Don't know the answer to that, other than the fact that young lady in this room did a very thorough job of researching that. Well, probably two young ladies in this room. And realized that apparently we had over budgeted for salaries last year. And so when they ran the numbers and double checked the numbers, even with 1% COLA and adding the recycle center attendant to the solid waste budget, because she was, Leslie was on her own budget. It was her benefits and water. So there again, I didn't see the sense in having a separate budget to have to pay somebody out of, having to pay for water to the recycle center, because the county pays everything else. So, Chris worked to move her over, and even after moving her over, the salaries for this year are lower than last year's. And that was, last year we had 8.25 people, now we have 9.25 people in the solid waste fund. Well, actually, it was 9.25, but she was a standoff. So, having looked at that, that's a good start, I guess. But that salary come down. I had some overtime money. My overtime's getting taxed. We're supporting more and more external events, with, like I had a couple guys at the cemetery, cleanup days, food truck Fridays, and there's always extra people needed to support events. So I had to bump that up because last year I had 3,500 spent over program for overtime, and we went over that slightly. Disability insurance, new line item that was added by the city this year. You'll find it added to solid waste and to the stormwater fund for disability insurance for employees. But overall, our solid waste, ignore that last line. That last line's wrong. Our solid waste, decreased by $92,000.
I was wondering about that. I was
Yeah.
like, I think that's the number from the other slide.
It is. Sorry you had to see that. As many times as I've looked at that today. But that is the solid waste personnel summary, just the personnel summary. If there's anything that anybody wants to discuss, I'm happy to just leave that one alone. All right, here's the solid waste operations. I've made some increases again, as with the street department. We have a need for CDL training, and I have some employees that are willing to do the CDL training so that we always have qualified drivers available in the case of emergencies or vacations or sick or whatever. And so I've increased that $3,000 for CDL driver training. There's a administration fees flex. Now, for years, I've wondered what that was, and Tracy got down to the root of the problem this year. She found out that money is set aside for the Task C FSA card. We have to pay quarterly, I think it's quarterly, service fees for the management of the FSA card for the solid waste employees. And that's what the $585 is for this year. For last year, it was $420, but those fees have gone up. Line 171, fees for administration. So previously, fees for administration, sometimes they were in there and sometimes they were not. So fees for administration are for reimbursement of administrative expenses to the general fund for shared staff services and offsetting the need for hiring additional staff. So that's Kate. So the solid waste fund pays a monthly fee to the general fund for Kate's services. That's where the 25% Kate comes in at. And then there's also some other expenses baked into that, like for use of postage and, anything to do with administration for the solid waste department that gets done has to be done by Kate or myself. And so that money right there goes back into the general fund as fees for administration. Contract services is where we usually have our temporary labor for leaf collection. This year we took out a little extra service. we hired some temporary labor to help with toters for when people were on vacation, because as I've discussed in previous years, anytime somebody was out of solid waste, we had to take somebody out of the street department to backfill them, which cut the street department low on manpower. So this year, JB worked a contract with the people that provide our lease service collection. And we were able to take an additional, we had one guy that we could call him at the drop of a hat, and he could come and tow when one of the toters was out sick or on vacation. So that really saved us some labor in the street department by not having to use those guys. And so that's what that $40,000 temporary labor for leaf collection and solid waste services. And iWorks support. It also pays a $6,000 bill for iWorks for the solid waste department. Truck maintenance. I raised truck maintenance this year. You remember we had the big $48,000 resolution in September. Well, the truck should be here next week. It's taken this long to find a wiring harness, but they have it in the shop and it is being repaired and it's supposed to be ready hopefully by next week. And we'll have it back. So it'll be like getting a new one. But I increased the funding in truck maintenance to more closely reflect what we actually spent the last 2 years for truck maintenance and solid waste. Uniforms, inflationary costs, tires, inflationary costs, and the total operations for solid waste department went up $56,689 or 14%. Also, $102,000 for a capital purchase. Well, let me go back up to 600. There will be debt service coming next year for 2 trucks that I'm going to buy this year. But that is the budget for the operations for solid waste. I'm not sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. All right. Any questions?
Are those for the Ford Lightning trucks?
That's what I'm going to order, 2 Ford Lightnings, just like the previous 2 we ordered, but this would be coming out of a loan for the solid waste department.
Okay.
So we'll pay those back over a 4-year period. And then that kind of goes to Commissioner Hayes' question, about programming replacement vehicles. We it's been years since we intentionally bought new trucks, for any kind of life cycle. So we'll start that process, with these first 4 trucks that we get in here in the next 8 or 9 months, hopefully. All right, stormwater. All right, stormwater is another one of those that funds itself. We're still at 4.75 FTE. As we went through, 50% Rick, 50% Nate, 50% Director Johnson, and 25% Kate. And then 3 permanent employees. Salaries increased by 2.9%. Health insurance increased by 109%. And so it appears that in previous years, the stormwater fund may not have been paying the supervisor's insurance benefits. And so Tracy worked through all of those and she broke it all out evenly, because if a fund is paying 50% of a person, then it ought to pay 50% of the health benefits, insurance and dental and the whole 9 yards. So it did cause an increase in funding. And of course, when you say 109%, woo! But it was a kind of hefty, and then dental insurance, tripled just about. And so those percentages they're kind of deceiving. When you look at that, you're thinking millions of dollars, automatically. But it's in the thousands. But
Director Tate,
yes, sir.
I'd just like to point out that generally speaking, our insurance is ranked flat across the city. So this is just an internal allocation where the stormwater is taking up its fair share.
Mm-hmm.
But insurance as a line is listed in our budget, and it's all forms of insurance, cyber, liability, medical, and it's generally been remarkably flat for the last 2 years. So
Yeah,
we haven't seen that kind of growth across the
when
board.
you look at the insurance lines that he's speaking of, that's just for general fund. Each of the stormwater, solid waste, they pay their own portion of that.
And overall, the personnel budget for the stormwater division increased 12.5%. All right, stormwater operations. There again, you see line 170, you see that fees for administration. Again, that goes back to the FSA card through the Task C program. That nearly doubled. Okay, then you get down to fees for administration. Previously, fees for administration had been rolled into the contract services line, and I asked Chris if she could move that out. So she created the line for fees for administration. Now there again, the fees for administration includes the support that the general funded staff provide, Kate and her service and expenses, for office administration. It also includes the iWork program. No, that's contract service. It also includes the stormwater fee. That's what I was trying to verify. Every equivalent residential unit, ERU, in the city of Red Bank, in stormwater, $9 of that fee that we collect goes to the county. And so that's why that $96,000, that's not just all county, and it's not just all fees for administration. It's all rolled up together. So there's about 3 different buckets combined into that $96,000. The next line, contract services. We have at least one stormwater failure that we're looking at right now. And I've got a contractor waiting on me to get back with him to turn him loose so he can do some design work. It's over on Pine Breeze, going down the hill toward Chattanooga. There's a cross drain and the head wall is falling off. The road's stable, but we can't just leave it like that forever because eventually something will fail. And so I've got a contractor. So I knew we were going to have to have some engineering services out of stormwater. So I plugged in $80,000 in contract services. And that also includes the iWork stormwater management program that we pay for that fee. Line 242, water. You'd think stormwater would have enough water, but stormwater has to have water to make water. And so we bought the new jetter truck this year under a TDEC ARPA fund grant and the street sweeper, and those require water. Well, the best place to get water, unless you want to put them out there overnight filling up with a water hose, is to go to a fire hydrant. Well, you have to have a backflow device, and we have to pay for water out of the fire hydrant. I don't guess the fire department has to do that. We do. So those guys have to go and put a backflow device, and it counts the units of water that go through it, and then we give that off to the water company every month, and they send us a bill. So this year we spent right at $6,000 in water for the jetter truck and the stormwater, or the street sweeper. And previous to this year, we did not have a water line in that. So when I started getting bills, I went to Chris and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? And she said, we'll fix it. So I put $6,000, that's an increase in there for water, for those assets to do their job. Medical supplies was an increase. We didn't have a line in there previously for medical supplies. And that's simply when somebody has an accident, we have to run them over to AFS, or if they have to be drug tested, that's $300 is what pays those. And, we don't expect a lot of that to happen, so there's just $300. Collection fees, that's what we pay the county to collect our stormwater fees. We pay them $6,000 annually for them to collect our stormwater funds and resubmit that to us. I increased uniforms by $2,500. Fuel, I had to increase fuel. Back when Davis started, we had, a backhoe and a bar truck from the street department. Now we have a backhoe, a dump truck, a heavy duty work truck, a street sweeper, and a jetter truck, and they all burn fuel, believe it or not. And we didn't hardly have enough fuel in this year's budget. We'll make it, but it was really, really close. We can't do anything extra. So I increased the fuel budget for this year, just by a little bit. And then I increased safety supplies. You can never have enough safety supplies. Those guys, they depend on those supplies to protect themselves. And, I feel like that is a justified increase. And then overall, the stormwater budget reflects a 96.5% increase, but that's largely due to the engineering service addition. We didn't have any engineering services last year. So that's the justification for that. And then reduction in capital expenses. We are going to have to buy a portable air compressor. The street department has an old, it's like 40 years old air compressor, and they can't get parts for it. So the street department and the stormwater department are going to split the cost of a portable air compressor that they can share on the job site for, you know, things like jackhammering and, you know, crack sealing and things like that. Any questions about that?
Who'd you say was gonna, merge with the portable air compressor?
The street department and the stormwater.
Street storm. Thank you. And when you mentioned the increase was the engineering
Line 200?
of the contract services.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, that's $80,000 for engineering and also the cost of the iWorks stormwater management module,
got it. Okay, thank you.
which we had a class on today. All right.
So maybe I'm kind of forming this thought in my mind as I ask the question. So a couple of these line items are really lean, like the fuel, for example, or you know, some of like the vehicle maintenance lines. Would it almost be prudent to up those requests a little bit? I mean, or is it as simple as we do a budget amendment to cover the difference later on?
Well, I think I'm hedging my bets that we have mostly all new equipment in that department. And I'm hedging my bets that we have very few. Now, that's not to say something couldn't happen, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm willing to keep the budget low. And then, you know, if we have to come back and ask for a budget amendment, you know, to protect the fund balance that's in that account. Yeah, because it was low in years past because we didn't have hardly any equipment in there.
Mhm.
And now it's low because everything we have is less than 2 years old. And so I feel comfortable and I feel safe, you know, keeping it about where it's at, but you know, that's no guarantees.
I was just looking at the last year's budget for the collection fees, and it's 2,600, and it's up to 6,000. So that was an increase from Hamilton County
I'll
of
have to-
$2,400.
I'll have to punt on that because I don't recall that number was just in there from previous year.
Okay,
Their fees to us have not changed, so if there's a discrepancy there, we'll have to get to the bottom line, because we have a written agreement. Chris, you wanna speak to that? There's a,
Yeah, it's a 1% fee, and they just take it out of what they pass along to us each month. And I think that it was maybe misbudgeted in 25.
oh, okay.
It was
Yeah,
miscalculated.
that was what I was gonna say. I think we've been underpaying. And, you know, the county doesn't do a real good job of invoicing.
Mhm.
You know, they routinely wait till the following budget year to send us last year's budget invoice or invoice item, so.
they collect 3 categories of revenue. Chris, I'm looking at you to bail me out here. First is property taxes, and that's the 1%. And then I believe it's actually a set fee for stormwater and sanitation. It's like a flat fee of 25,000, something like that.
It's like 25.
Yeah.
25,000.
And that hasn't changed any time recently.
The taxes are 2% for property tax.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay. And they pay, when they send our payments, like our property tax payments or, you know, our portion of stormwater sanitation, is that like a check they send us or is,
No, we receive that by ICH around the 10th of the month. So
so it's automatically deposited into our account?
Mhm.
And they have to process these anyway because they take out their portion of the stormwater fee and they're charging us an additional fee to okay. Okay. And we already pay county taxes, but okay.
Well,
Just
the
I
solid
will,
waste is 25,000, and they do bill us separately.
Okay.
For that, so that's 25,000 here, so that's a flat.
Okay.
It's the stormwater that they collect, that is the 1% fee that they're taking.
Okay. It's digital, so it doesn't it's not like they're sending us paper checks that would cost them money, right?
Right. It's
Okay.
just-
I'm just trying to understand, right?
Mayor, if I could add
Sure.
something.
Please,
So-
Mr. Granum.
Thank you, Mayor. On that bubble chart that I love, down on the lower left, we have a listing of key partners. And there's like 6 or 7 ways we list Hamilton County.
Sure.
And we pay them for all that. We pay them to host GIS, we pay them to run our elections, we pay them to collect our taxes. And so, but there are things that Hamilton County does for us that we don't have to pay for directly. EMS is one example, and sheriff services is another. Oftentimes, the sheriff service comes in the form of mutual aid. They back up our PD. But of course, all the jail functionality, we do not pay directly for district attorney. So, but there is a list of categories of service that we do pay Hamilton County, and there is actually a written agreement. So we have a written agreement. If you look across the county, not all cities approach the county for this level of service. Some counties collect, some cities actually collect their property taxes. But for us, and unique to Red Bank, is they collect the fees for stormwater and sanitation, and we have signed up to that fee schedule, and it didn't change this year. And I'm gonna say it precedes me as city manager, that agreement, and the fees rise and fall, the percent doesn't. It's based on volume of collection, so we've been very satisfied with the service from trustee, is that who it is? Yeah, in this case, it's the relationship with the trustee's office.
Thank
Mayor.
you. I appreciate you. Okay, thank you.
All right, any more questions on that slide? Move on. Okay, my final slide, State Street aid. I reduced, the cost of contract services last year. I had, $180,000, I believe it was, baked into that for guardrail replacement. We will have some guardrail replacement done here before the end of this budget year, but nowhere near close to 180,000, it'll be closer to 70,000. And so there'll be some unspent funds in last year's budget in that. The contract, CARTA contract, I think last year was grant funded. So this year we're going to have to pay a higher price, and there's a percentage that you can pay out of your state street aid funds. And so the city manager and I decided that 30,000 was a good number. I think you were having trouble nailing CARTA down for an actual cost.
Well, we've been over this. It is a budget estimate that's based on us, the city, picking up the full portion of the difference between their costs and fare and anticipated ridership. And the anticipated ridership is 65 trips. And I believe the anticipated cost per trip was 45.50 times 65 per month times 12. So that gets us in the ballpark. We may have to do a budget amendment at the end of the year to raise it a little bit, but it's close. It's about $14,000 more this year than last year.
Okay. Come down to line 255, engineering services. Now, you read over there on my word balloon, it says engineering services for stormwater utility maintenance. Well, we had engineering services and stormwater utility, but state street aid will also allow you to perform drainage maintenance along the public right of way and streets. And so I put money in there because that helps fund some of our traffic studies. We can use some of that money to fund some traffic studies. So that's the reason that 185,000 is in there for engineering services. I don't have specifics yet on what we're going to spend it for, but we do have several upcoming plans and projects that will probably take some design work or some kind of project management from a consultant. Signal lights and repair, we reduced that. Supplies, I increased the supplies. And if you see supplies and street signs 342 went to $100,000. Supplies went up to $25,000. And that is to support to develop strategies for safe streets in accordance with commission goals. That money will be used, and I'll get into that in just a minute. In your packets, I'll let you a copy of my budget memo, and we'll look at that just briefly after we finish this slide. But that's what those fund increases are. It's and $25,000. Both of those lines can be used for sign maintenance and sign installation and improvements, to make safer streets. You know, whether that be flashing speed limit signs, enhanced crosswalk signs, which Nate is working on a enhanced crosswalk, safety scheme right now. So that whenever this budget gets approved, we can still, go ahead and implement some of these changes, and that's where that money will come from. Debt service, 554,000. Now, I said we'd come back around to debt service again, talk about a truck. I'm using the State Street Aid Fund to purchase a new dump truck with a salt spreader and snowplow attachment. The only truck that we have now is a 1989 Mack with a snowplow on it. Now, Justin Hendrick got it out in January and drove up and down Dayton Boulevard on it, but we wouldn't let him go on any side streets because it's not a dependable truck. The brakes have gone out on it a few times. So I'm using State Street Aid funds. Do I?
This is good.
Yes.
This is a good thing.
Yeah, State Street Aid funds. I'm gonna buy a new truck. It's gonna come already fit with a snowplow and a new salt and sand spreader. We have 2 salt and sand spreaders. One of them has been down to Stringfellow for about 6 months. They can't get parts for it, and they said it's not worth fixing. The other one we took down there, and they've got parts ordered, and they've been ordered since January, to try to get, they can repair it, but it's been this long because of the age and everything. They're just scrounging for parts. So we're gonna buy a new truck, new salt spreader, and a new snowplow, so we'll be in business before the next major snow event. And then we still have a dump truck that will just do just a salt spreader that we can refit and have a second one. But, you know, this will give us a leg up in the game, you know, by doing that. Resurfacing secondary roads, secondary streets, $700,000. Nate is working on a schedule to resurface $700,000 worth of streets. Now, he's concentrating in what we call zone 3 and 4, which is north of Euclid, left and right. And so, you know, we can't, he ran the numbers to repave all of the roads in zone 3 and 4 that had a 8-year or less remaining service life. And that bill come to $40 million. So I told him to whittle it down to 700,000. Because, you know, that's about as large a debt service as we could carry from year to year, and we'll be paying for that for 4 to 5 years.
4 or 5 or 45?
4 to 5.
4 to 5, okay.
Just depending on how it amortizes, you know, what kind of schedule they give us and what we can afford to pay.
You determined that from the pavement condition index?
Yes, sir, we did.
Yeah.
We used that study that we paid through our work, and they uploaded it. You know, we can go and look at all the roads. Nate is trying to learn to trust it right now. So he's actually going out and looking at the roads himself. He said it helps him get a better feel of what he's looking at. So he's took that on as a chore, and about every day he goes out for a couple hours and rides around and sends me text messages back, says, "Hey, are you aware of this?" So I'm glad he's doing that. But by the time we get this budget adopted and we move into, you know, next fiscal year, we'll have that narrowed down to some kind of list of roads that need paving in those zones.
So I'm looking at the budget and I see it was budgeted at 250K last year, but the forecast is showing only a little over 84,000 use. Was there a reason why we weren't able to do more repaving this year?
Well,
And do we anticipate actually being able to reach that $700,000 mark?
Oh, we can reach it. In years past, since I've been here, probably on 3 separate occasions in 12 years, the city's borrowed somewhere around $1 million. And each time that we borrowed that much money, we've effectively paid $600,000 to $800,000 worth of roads. And then the money's sitting there till next year. We've used it for paving in another year, but it's hard to get a company to come in and do a large paving project or a small paving project. They want to come in where they can make some money. And, you know, we can find all kinds of companies who come in and pave driveways. But, you know, to pave center lane, miles road, you know, they want big tickets. So, you know, we'll put together a plan for this year on how we're going to best utilize that $700,000. And we'll start paying the debt service. And then in 2 to 3 years, we'll start working on the next paving plan. And we'll keep that. It will be built into our capital improvements program. and we'll keep that rolling from cycle to cycle. I'm not gonna say it's gonna be 2 years, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be 5 years, maybe somewhere in between. But, we'll have the data, in 3 years, we'll have to hire our to come back and do another pavement conditioning index, because by then the roads will have changed, and they'll come back and do a new assessment. We'll upload it, and of course, that'll shift all the numbers around and change some things, I'm sure.
Is that 5 year, would that be 5 years since they
5.
would have done it?
Yeah,
Initially?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say the relative cost of doing that seems well worth it. I mean,
And we're real fortunate in Red Bank, people think that their asphalt's turned white or gray and, that it's bad, but, we don't have a lot. We got a lot of street cuts that contractors have made, and, we're trying to do a better job. Nate's, I read some of his emails that he sent some of the contractors about their shoddy work, so.
oh, you should live in front of my house.
That's what it takes. Yeah, your road,
It's,
I'm waiting to see what the final outcome is on that one.
me too. I'll pick up the steel plates.
Well, and I'll tell you this, if you have an issue, if they come and pull a street cut permit, they're responsible for that permit or that cut for 2 years. So if it fails or it's substandard, then, I need to know, so we contact that company. They have to provide a surety bond, for every cut they make. And then if they can't do it properly, then we can do it and we can file a claim against that bond. So, but a lot of times they come in and they'll cut it, and we won't find out about it until they've patched it and went on. And then we have a hard time finding out who did the cut. But we're getting better because we can tell their work.
Good or bad thing.
All right, and overall, total budget increased $784,554, but that's largely due to the capital expenses.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any questions? And so.
So just a quick question, in future years, we won't see separated out like parks budgets and so on and so forth? Or are they going to stay in there and they're just gonna have a $0 budget?
I think
They'll roll off whenever the previous year doesn't have any expenses.
Okay,
that's
And
a
then they'll roll off and they won't have their separate tabs.
okay,
But until then,
So, like,
they
the
still have to
yeah,
continue to file it with the comptroller's office.
oh, okay.
Because they're in this version that we have.
Yeah,
right
and
here.
like the recycling department for Leslie, so, okay.
So in this little handout I gave you, there's a budget memo starting on page 2. And it's the same thing that's on the website. If you've seen the one that's on the website. It just goes through some of our goals. The top 3 goals are goals that are directly associated with Public Works Department commission goals and how we intend to implement those. And it goes through practically every division with goals. Some of them, they don't have, fleet doesn't have any glamorous goals, but, the street department using state street aid funds, improve signage. We're looking at data collection, the speed limit signs will actually count cars and speeds too, implementing that, putting that in our toolbox. They're not outrageously priced. They are expensive, but it's not like hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's tens of thousands of dollars to put some of these throughout the city.
Is part of the signage the school zone on Morrison Springs Road also?
Well, that is similar to what we're going to do throughout Dayton Boulevard and some of the side streets. Once we get to, we should have those activated next week. And they will come on with the school zone signals that have been up there for years, and they'll work through those same times.
And the signs are eye level.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. You can also see our page 2 of that. I've got a capital projects table in there for the projects that we currently have ongoing and projects that we've submitted to the RPO for next year for the 2026-2029 TIP. And, I'm hearing favorable comments from MPO personnel. At first they said no, and then they said, well, you're gonna get some, and then now they're saying, hey, we need the rest of your projects. There might be, so I'm holding my breath, but I'm hoping that, they look at us favorable. That was some of these projects.
Director Tate, can you, number 4, the application for the federal Safe Streets for All, have we been introduced to that yet, or is that new? At the top
It's
of,
new.
Yeah, that's, which page are we on?
That's the third page of that memo.
Okay. I was looking right over, I think I had my thumb on it. That is a grant that closes June the 26th, I believe it is. And, Leslie and I talked to our partners at SETD last week, and, I don't know if she saw the emails this evening, but SETD actually has someone who's ready to start grant writing for us to apply for this grant. And he wants some other information that he can utilize to apply for this grant. So we're gonna see how that goes, and hopefully it will get us some money for not implementation, but maybe demonstration and help with our right sizing study.
okay.
Yes, it is new.
Yeah.
If you look at this document online, I've got dozens of hyperlinks there for taking to different websites where this information can be found. And then there's another section, I've got a little post-it note on here. So I took the budget and I tried something different this year. And I wasn't ready to present this to the commission, but I fed it to AI. And it produced a really nice document with statistics, percentages, differences. And I thought it was worth, giving to the commission. I looked through it rather intensely to make sure that there wasn't any glaring errors. And I didn't see anything. Everything pretty much went right along with what I had in my slide presentation. But it lets you look at each division, at their personnel and their operations and their capital, and see what kind of changes were made. It gives you some thoughts there on key takeaways and final thoughts and things like that. So I just thought I would include that, give you something else to read.
Thank you. Thank you,
That's all I
Director
have.
Tate. Any other questions for right now? Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
So the rest of this is AI, the end of
Yeah,
this. is
everything
AI.
behind that yellow sticky
Okay,
note
okay,
is AI.
okay.
Appreciate the disclaimer on that.
I pass it away.
All right, moving on to our next agenda item, our community development budget presentation. Director Johnson. Welcome. Good evening.
I'll get started. I don't anticipate being too long. If y'all needed a break, I'm fine to keep going or just what.
Maybe after this one.
Yeah, maybe after this, we might take like a 5-minute break. Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree.
This for Chief Seymour, though.
Do it.
Or this is for Chief Seymour, though.
So, online, the budget memo is available. I did not print copies of that this evening, so I apologize I didn't do that. But it is available. We will walk through it here. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present the community development department budget for year 26. As you guys well know, the department was established last year with the goal of providing a more centralized and strategic approach to community and economic development with the following oversight responsibilities: planning and zoning, code enforcement, stormwater utility administration, grant resourcing and management, contracts management, and committee and board representations. Thank you. As you look onto the second page, we'll take a look at what the budget proposal is. This just presents some of the highlights. As Director Tate mentioned earlier, part of my salary does pull from the stormwater fund for stormwater administration services. We have no staff changes. We stayed at 3.75 and we're still 3.75. And Mr. Tate again did a good job explaining what some of those differences are and
Mhm.
how we share resources internally at City Hall, but then how we account for them in the appropriate funding resources. One note that I will say is that we do have one jobs classification change proposed for this fiscal year, and that is from what we call our administrative staff person, which is Beth. She also shares resources through City Hall up front, covering the front office and those types of things. So we are proposing a classification change to an office manager for her this fiscal year.
So she stays in, or is set in the community development
Correct.
department.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, but we still do loan her out and she does cover a lot of upfront, which is very helpful. Ruthie does cover a lot now.
Mhm.
And Beth is really starting to pick up some of that institutional knowledge.
Mm.
That sometimes you see go away when people do retire, you lose that, but there's been a good connection with sharing of knowledge for future purposes. No staff changes in personnel.
But her salary comes 100%
Correct.
from community development. Okay.
Correct. Looking at our operating funds, you're going to see a couple of changes. For one of the biggest line items that we had to change is to continue the support of the Red Bank Library Card Program. If you recall, last year, Commission did put 5,000. We did a really robust solicitation for donations to that program, which was very successful. So since we started that, on the occasion, we still get new inquiries. We are starting to get inquiries for those that received cards last year who may be coming up on their annual renewal. So it's proposed to fund that fully at $10,000 in my budget to continue that service. We will implement a program to evaluate how many have been activated and how often. It's easy to activate something, but to maintain
And then
it,
not use
that's
it.
what we want
Right.
to see.
Yeah.
And so first priorities will be those to renew those cards that have been active and are ongoing.
Mhm.
It'll be a very loose evaluation. We don't like to tell people, no, we want to use a library card, but we believe it's the intent of the commission to continue a program that was initiated to those users that are going to be actively engaged in the program.
Mhm.
Some additional increases you're going to see is toward our administrative hearing officer. One of our goals this year is to look at increased code enforcement across the city. I know that sounds like a negative when you say increased code enforcement. Doesn't always have to be a negative. Sometimes people will just become nose blind to what their property conditions look like, or they're just unaware of some opportunities that may be out there that will enhance their property as a private business owner. So it's not always a negative, it's a positive. And I'll talk more about that as we go. We're going to see a slight increase in some training and educational subscriptions. That's a new thing. We have educational requirements for some of our board members. It can be challenging to find, historically, bring a speaker in. How do you do a presentation during a formal meeting? What we have learned are several professional subscription services that are unique, say, for example, to the Planning Commission. That are specific for land use regulations. So we started that last year with Planning Commission members, and we hope to increase and incorporate it into our BZA board members as well.
Aren't I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be wrong, but those training, some of the training is like required by statute.
Yes,
Is
it
that right?
Planning Commission is statutorily required to have a minimum of 4 hours training
Okay.
annually.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
So we believe the approach to that is, I don't want to throw it just into their wheelhouse and say, go find something and report back. We believe it should be purposeful and also brings them along for the journey of where Red Bank is moving forward. So
Yeah.
those online subscriptions seem to work best.
Okay.
And you'll see a slight increase for uniforms. Our building official, it's been a while since he's had his uniforms replaced and updated, so we're going to incorporate that into the budget this year.
A while.
Yes, I will note he does not complain. That's
No, he
just been an
doesn't.
observation of mine. So keeping him looking his best as he's out in the field representing the city. But overall, taking a look at what the fiscal year budget proposal is, it's reflecting a $20,640 increase. And it does incorporate a 9.5 COLA for staff. And again, it also incorporates that classification change for existing personnel. So as we continue to review, and with the mission statement of the department being to develop and implement strategies to enhance economic opportunity, build strong neighborhoods, promote public engagement, and ensure a dynamic framework for quality growth and development in Red Bank. Let's take a look at what some of our anticipated work programs will be for this year. Can you just write that down? You may need to change the orientation.
Just flip it. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So on the first line item is obviously commission goals. I think every department has that committed endeavor for their fiscal year work program. We will get a little bit more in depth on a couple of slides. So I just want to skip down to the land use regulation update line. This endeavor is aimed to create a modernized, more cohesive set of land use regulations that support the vision of the Red Bank Comprehensive Plan 2025, which we recently just finalized. It's in its process of being formally adopted, so it will make its way back to you, but you have had a presentation on the final outcomes of what this past year's endeavor has shown us. Some of those visions include opportunities for increased residential and mixed-use density, promoting infill, multimodal transit-oriented developments, enhancing housing options and housing affordability, and to encourage more equitable and resilient growth in Red Bank. So the revised land use regulations for Red Bank should be clear and user-friendly and should be grounded in local priorities while also being adaptable to changing community needs and removing unnecessary barriers for land development.
Mhm.
It is a tall order, but we're up for the challenge. So we are prepared to release an RFQ as soon as, and as early as July. Budget year goes in. We're preparing those RFPs now to onboard a professional to help us walk through that process. I anticipate a minimum 6 months. That would be very aggressive, but realistically, we're probably looking at a 9-month cycle, start to finish. And when I say finish, you would have final documents that then start the process for adoption. We envisioned equal amounts, if not more, public engagement opportunities through this journey. We've learned through the comprehensive plan that a variety of people in Red Bank want to know what's happening, they want to have an understanding of it, and they want to support it. So that will be baked into our RFP as a very robust public engagement opportunities as we go along. So I think, just to clarify, I think a lot of times people don't have a good understanding of what we mean by land use regulations. That starts with your subdivision regulations. How are you going to cut up property? It includes your zoning ordinances. It includes your site design review. It will incorporate a lot of our initiatives and a lot of our ideas. One being is the Complete Streets initiative. So having those ideas and how do you bake those into land use regulations that again are user-friendly and they remove obstacles. So it's going to be a tremendous educational opportunity as we go before we have an end result of a cohesive set of land use regulations. Moving on, taking a look again at code enforcement in the Planning Commission, we are preparing a new fee schedule, not just for the building department, but it's citywide. So that's going to be coming, we hope next week, actually. It's on your agenda for a first ordinance reading. So that has been a journey. We're also going to continue working with the administrative hearing officer. Something we implemented this past year was rather than a as-need basis, we set up regular quarter meetings of our administrative hearing officer. So it gave our code enforcement opportunities more clarity and more direction, and more expectations. If there was a problem, property owner was given fair notice. We've got several months to get through this. Otherwise, we do take it to the administrative hearing officer. So with that added work is more expense.
And there's 1.5 code enforcers employed.
Yeah, yes, we have a full-time building official, and we have a part-time building inspector.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. Thank you.
And our part-time also fills in full-time when we have, if someone else is out, vacation, sick leave, something like that, to make sure that we're not missing the mark on our inspections.
Okay. Thank you.
Something else we're going to do this year in our budget is we're going to take a closer look at our commercial corridors. We're looking for increased enforcement surrounding property conditions, and more so to ensure that we are in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program and flood regulations. A lot of times people just may not have an awareness of that floodway actually is creeping, and you may have temporarily put a structure there that can potentially have significant damage if we have a flood event. So it is our responsibility to keep a finger on that pulse and make sure that we aren't allowing things to end up in our floodway, flood hazard areas that aren't properly permitted. By doing so, again, it ensures our continued participation with the National Flood Insurance Program, which is what makes flood insurance actually affordable for property owners. It's a full circle event.
So us, you're saying us as a city,
Yes,
that helps private property owners when they have to get flood insurance for their
Correct.
property.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And part of that commitment is ensure compliance with the flood regulations.
Right.
When FEMA maps are updated, we pay attention to those. If regulatory changes come down, we have to make sure that they're properly implemented and are enforced. Additionally, it's just communicating with property owners that have property in the flood area to know what they can and what they can't do and how to connect those dots. So, but insurance is a number one priority. Taking a look at, again, just the continued dedication from the Planning Commission and the BZA members as we endeavor for the land use regulations. That's going to be another lift for them to come along. So they will become active members as we evaluate land use regulations. Continued activities with our partners, WWTA, CARTA, and McCamey. One of the big priorities this year will be to explore some sanitary sewer extension options in our areas that are currently unserved with public sanitary sewer. How do we make some of these connections, and what does that big picture look like?
This is related, but maybe not directly budget related, but with those basins that they did work on, I think it was 6, 7, and 8 maybe, or 5, 6, and 7, that we were waiting for like that time period so TDEC could be called to come down and review, maybe potentially lift some moratorium in certain areas. Do you know where we are on that?
Sure. WWTA is still in part 2 or phase 2 of their project in Red Bank.
Okay.
So the entire project has not completed. Phase 1 has been, but they're finishing phase 2. And it unfortunately does become a lengthy process. Sampling has to occur, monitoring occurs.
Yes.
That information is then calculated, analyzed, and then sent to the state for their review and oversight, as TDEC is the authority who actually oversees moratoriums and when they get imposed.
And I think they were only, when they came in and presented to us, they were only going to be able to commit a little, like 1.2 million or something, I think, to phase 2, which was not going to cover that project in full.
Correct.
And so,
But
We're
overall,
saying
phase
maybe-
1 was over 9 million.
right,
So,
right.
yes, so phase 2 is trying to hit as much as they can.
Mhm.
I'm hoping whenever they do finish that, we will get a final analysis from WWTA to kind of say, where are we? What
Okay.
have we accomplished and what do we have left to do?
So they're going to have to complete all of the work before TDEC can come down and look, and okay,
No, that's why they do work in phases.
okay,
So with phase 1, that information is already in the hopper.
Okay.
I would say, as far as gathering data and
Okay.
providing the sampling. A lot of times it just comes down to sampling.
Mhm.
You have to wait for the weather events to occur to be able to capture the data.
Right.
But they are doing their due diligence.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we are at the mercy of TDEC.
Yeah.
And their staff review their processes.
Okay.
But in the meantime, the work that WWTA has been able to do, they are able to look at individual properties on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
It's my understanding we do not have any other properties that are pending
Okay.
or there is an inquiry.
Mhm.
So as those do come in, again, that's Eddie's first go-to
Okay.
is to make sure, hey, communicate with WWTA. They do review those on a case-by-case
Okay.
basis.
Okay.
So yeah, we're seeing some relief,
Sure,
but not a blanket
right,
release.
okay. Thank you.
But again, we will continue to work with WWTA on all things sanitary sewer.
Yes.
Again, looking at grant resourcing and administration, I will work and continue to work with others, to find any and all funding resources that come our way that check some of our boxes. As Commissioner Fairbanks Harvey mentioned, the Safe Streets for All, yeah, that's a new one. We just became aware of it, so we're internally pushing the needle to try to get some answers, whether or not we're ready to come back with a resolution, because sometimes we discover we're not. But Director Tate's done a good job to communicate that with not only TPO, but also with SETD to find out how we make this grant application come together in a short time frame. We will also continue to work with public art. We've been very fortunate to have some funding opportunities successful. We've got a couple of applications still out there. But as the public art board really starts to find their footing and their ideas and their desires, I think we're also finding funding opportunities that come along with that. So I'm hoping in the next 2 commission meetings, we should be presenting another resolution for a grant application as well. It doesn't take much to have a great impact in public art. So it may be small grants, but again, those are still initiatives to see public art come to life. Yeah. And I will remind you and the public, this Saturday, we have a ribbon cutting during the Jubilee. It'll be at 1 o'clock for the Kids Corner bathroom mural. So there'll be lots of information